What are the top 5 horror genre audiobooks that you have never heard of? Stay tuned to find out. Welcome back to another edition of Drotalks Audiobooks. Dro here, and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 horror audiobooks that you may have never heard of. Before we get started, do me a favor, if you're an audiobook enthusiast like myself, make sure you hit that subscribe, like this video, so you can stay tuned for more audiobook content. With that said, let's move on to book number 5. Coming in at number 5 is Shingles. This is written by a slew of authors, so I'm just going to mention Drew Hayes, who he's my favorite author right now, at least one of my favorite authors. So Shingles is borderline horror. It's comparable from Tales to the Crypt, if you remember that series. It's each story in this audiobook is an independent story. There is a common link to them, but this is more of a comedy slash horror. I'm not sure if that's a genre. That has to be a genre. A funny horror, horror media. That don't sound right, but either way, this audiobook and this collection of stories are uncomfortable, they're funny, they're intriguing, and they're very original. And the one thing I really like about this audiobook is this is a story that you can go back to time and time again. I've already listened to it twice just because it's so funny. Not all the stories are go back to every time, let me just be clear on that one, but there are some golden nuggets on here. And believe it or not, my favorite story is not by Drew Hayes, so definitely check out Shingles, coming in at our number 5 spot. Coming in at number 4 is The Bazaar of Bad Dreams by none other than Stephen King. Yeah, you might be hearing his name a lot on here. This is similar to Shingles. This is a collection of small short stories, but it's absolutely fantastic. Unlike Shingles, there's very little comedy here. These are serious stories with serious repercussions and fantastic storytelling, that of only what Stephen King can deliver. So if you're in the mood for a bite-sized morsel of really good stories, check out The Bazaar of Bad Dreams by Stephen King. Coming in our number 3 spot is none other than our classic 1984, written by the master George Orwell and narrated by Simon Preble. I hope I said his name right. 1984 is a classic, must listen, must read. You got to get the story into you. It is just absolutely great, and it's terrifying, not in the sense of there's boogeymen and monsters lurking in the corners or behind the closet door, under the bed. No way. This is all about Big Brother, invasion of privacy, and where the thought police tell you what you need to think. This is very relevant in our society today, where we are literally losing the ability of free speech just because someone gets offended. And although this is a very complex debate that we're not even going to talk about here, it is something to be very wary about when you listen to stories like 1984, because remember, any year can be 1984. Coming in our number 2 slot is another story, another book by Stephen King, and this is Dr. Sleep. For those of you that are Stephen King fans, or at least know who he is, because I think at this point we all know who Stephen King is, you will be aware that there is a fantastic book, one of his most renowned books, and one of the best film adaptations, even though I don't agree with the end, and this is The Shining. So Dr. Sleep is actually the sequel to The Shining, and it takes place a good amount of time later. Actually, it correlates to the ending of The Shining and when that was written to the beginning of when Dr. Sleep was released. And your character, your protagonist, which I believe his name was Danny, but don't quote me on that, is the little boy in The Shining, and he's a grown-up now. And he's dealing with the trauma of everything that happened in The Shining, which I'm not going to spoil here because that's another book that you definitely got to listen to. But he's dealing with it in his own way, and this supernatural masterpiece by Stephen King. This is absolutely one of my favorite audiobooks from him, or books in general, and you definitely need to check out Dr. Sleep by Stephen King. And coming in at our number 1 slot is another book by Stephen King. What can I say? I really like Stephen King. He writes some fantastic books. And at number 1 is my all-time favorite Stephen King books, and one of my all-time favorite Stephen King audiobooks, and one of my all-time favorite books or audiobooks in general, and that is Salem's Lot. This book is narrated by Ron McLarty, and it is a superb story. This is Dracula in, I would say, today's society, but I mean, this really did take place around the 70, 80 time frame, but it's relevant even today. It's a very terrifying depiction. It's a journey. You got the same elements of Dracula, where your main character, your main cast is on a journey. All the characterization in this book is just top notch, fantastic. The world, and by the world I mean this town that is depicted in the story, is so well fleshed out. You care about all these characters, you care about what's happening, and it really moves you. It's a very suspenseful story. It gives way to one of my favorite characters in Father Callahan, who does appear in future Stephen King novels. I'll leave it at that. But just every aspect of this story is fantastic. It's a masterpiece. And if you're going to listen to one Stephen King audiobook, it should be Salem's Lot. So those are my top 5 horror audiobooks that you may have never listened to. I'm trying to look for audiobooks that are less popular, maybe a little bit older than what's very popular on today. So let me know what your top 5 favorite horror based audiobooks are. That way I can listen to them and thus make a video about them. That's how economy works. But as always, this has been Drotalks. Thank you for listening. And if you are an audiobook aficionado like myself, do me that favor. Hit that like and subscribe. Ring that bell to get notified. And we'll see you next time.